my mouth now and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Today's message and today's passage, one of the most familiar and probably one of the most misunderstood passages in the New Testament. It's clear that this radical action on Jesus' part was one of the reasons that the Sanhedrin, the ruling body of the Jews, got together and said, we have to get rid of this guy. He's upsetting the way that we do things. Now, if you go to Jerusalem, come and take a trip with me, perhaps next year we're going to organize one to go there, you'll see that the temple area, the temple itself was not that big. The temple was only entered once a year by one of the priests to go in for the people. It was not a big building. It was a big mausoleum. But in front of it was a huge open space about the size of a football field. And in that open space, there were huge braziers, huge open fires. And people would come and make sacrifices there, animal sacrifices. That goes back to the roots of the Jewish people who were wandering tribesmen, and they had kept animals with them, and that was one of the ways that they gave to God. So in this great big open space where animals were being sacrificed, there was business going on. First of all, there was an area where the animals were kept. You could buy doves. You had a little bit more money, you could buy a little goat. You had a little bit more money, you could buy a nice calf. And these animals would then be ritually slaughtered and burned on the big braziers, these big open fires. Now, to buy those, you had to use holy money. You couldn't use the money that you brought with you. After all, people had come from all over the place. They had come from some from Egypt, and some from what's now Lebanon, and some from Syria, and some from the area around Jerusalem. And so they would change their money into temple money, money that was kind of like script. And then they would take that over and buy the sacrifice, and then the priest would take it and do the sacrifice for them. Well, this was a really good deal for the temple, because in two ways they were making money. They were making money because the money changers, when they changed the money into this holy script, into this holy money, they were making a profit, and the temple got a percentage of it. So the temple made money off of the money changing. And then the animals that were sold, of course, the animals that were being sold, the animal keepers made money off of that. They had to have a license from the temple to do that. So it was big business. Jesus rolls into this scene and gets angry. The only time in the New Testament where his anger really flares up. And he makes a whip out of a couple of strings of rope and beats on the money changers, turns over their table and spreads the money everywhere and scatters the animals and makes a huge scene. And of course, this word would have gotten out to all of the people who were there in this great big open space. Here is this radical rabbi, the one from up north, the one from up in Galilee, coming down and telling us how to do our business. And of course, many of the poor people and the ones who were looking for the Messiah said, well, maybe this is a sign. Maybe this is a sign that things are going to change. My own reading of this passage is that Jesus didn't come and throw over the money changers and run off the animals just because they were involved in unscrupulous business. He says, you have turned my Father's house into a place of commerce. Jesus objected to what the temple had come to represent, power and exploitation. Center of Jewish faith, the symbol of their community, had come to represent power and exploitation. Jesus is really saying, and this gets to the real radical part, the temple will be no more. He says, now I'll knock down this temple and raise it in 3 days. They say, you can't knock down this temple. We've been working on it for 46 years. He's talking about his own body. Jesus is saying the temple will be gone, and it was gone within 30 years of his death in 66 AD. The Romans leveled it, they burned it, they took the stones, the great giant limestones, and burned them and ground them into powder and threw them in the field. Jesus is saying there is only one sacred site from now on. I am that sacred site. Follow me. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. I am the way, the truth, and the light. He says, I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and I am in you. He makes all of these I am statements. And the rulers get together and say, we can't have this. Too much. Now that incremental change, that's okay. We can kind of deal with that a little bit, but this, overthrowing the way that we've done business, and by the way that we make money, we just can't have that. It is an admonition against all who would work in faith, and to this day, to spend our money carefully and well. John Hagee, the TV evangelist that you see, and has big television shows and so forth. I don't begrudge John Hagee having a fine ministry. I do have a question that he owns 2 Learjets. You would think one would be enough. I guess one with the brown leather and one with the black leather. I don't know. But anyway, we can't use religious practices to feather our own nest. In the United Methodist Church, we're stepping into a process of realignment. We're going to go from 12 districts to 8. We thought we were going to save some money. We won't save a dime. We'll reorganize the deck chairs on the Titanic. Why are we doing this? Jesus says, forget about the organization. Forget about those symbols and those big buildings that you call holy. I'm now the temple. And you're the temple, right? Lives in you. So during this season of Lent, how are we going to cleanse our own temple? Prepare ourselves for the coming of Jesus. What are some ways that we can do that? Well, certainly we can cleanse our own physical temple by eating better, can't we?